Big 10 Plus 4 is a member of Odd Pods Media and ASAP All Sports All Plays Network.
Hello and welcome into Big 10 Plus 4, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. You can see the lineup there if you're joining us on a visual medium.
Sort of.
Yeah, that's right. We kind of just did a shuffle on you as we came through the gate. But if you're on video or audio, we have myself, Dalton Shetler, Tony Hollinsworth, and Sam Sprunger as we get ready for another week of Big 10 football. And to recap what was maybe not such a great week in some aspects for just college football in general. But I suppose that's kind of what lens you look through, because some people really enjoyed the Sunbelt Fun Belt weekend that they put on this past weekend. So, matter of fact, let's go ahead and start there, because we had chaos in college football. You have Appalachian State rolling into College Station and knocking off Texas A&M.
Who saw that happening?
Say nobody.
I was going to say the one thing I heard most talk about that game was how much of a letdown App State would have because they had to play so hard against North Carolina. That's the only thing I ever heard.
Scored 40 points in the fourth quarter against the Tar Heels, and then go to College Station and simply just won by not letting Texas A&M participate in the game. Like A&M had 35, 38 plays throughout the entire game, and App State had the ball for 41 minutes. Like they just
insane.
Yeah, they're like, it's what Iowa dreams of. We can talk about that in a little bit. But a great win there for App State. And by the way, maybe this is just a PSA to everybody. Don't schedule App State.
No, you'd have thought they would have learned from Michigan way back in the day. That's a dangerous game to schedule.
And even in some of these past years when they lose some of these games, boy, it's close. Like they're testing everybody. They're coming for lunch money. So just keep App State off.
Here's my question: does their history of competing well, not necessarily winning a lot, but competing well with these big schools, lend an option of them going to like the Big 12?
I mean,
you know what I mean? Kind of. I mean, it could work out to where they're competing year in and year out in big games. I mean, and they've done it historically too, you know, to where maybe they could be pulled into a big one of those lower big conferences.
We've seen schools make that climb in the past. Recently, Cincinnati, UCF just joined the Big 12. UCF came from nowhere, but because they had their national championship, if you're on visual medium, that was air quotes, national championship.
Hey, they were undefeated that year. I'm not going to say I called them national champions.
They're actually within the rules.
I can hear the argument.
They have. Right. So that actually is official. It's like asterisk with, who was it? I think Bama won that year. It's asterisk with Bama that Bama and UCF both are like co-national champions for that year.
Well, good on them.
And there's not much of a reason App State can't make that same climb. And you think about too, this is more from a basketball sense, and this is something that hasn't happened but could happen. We heard rumors about that earlier this year. But Gonzaga, considering where that program started to where it is now, where all the conferences wouldn't mind having Gonzaga in the Big East talking about it, like it's absolutely a climb that could happen. So I'm with that. I like that idea. I hadn't thought about that much.
I mean, I heard somebody mention it, and the person like immediately shot it down, and I'm sitting there thinking, really, honestly, I mean, if they're competing with the recruits they're getting now and they're competing year in and year out, why wouldn't they be of interest? Because when they're competing every year, they're getting better recruiting then. And from that conference.
I'd speak even more to the other point, and Tony can jump in whenever he wants on this too, but with conference realignment being what it is, there's nobody that knows anything. So if anybody instantly shuts it down, like they don't have the answer. Like, we've seen some crazy. Did anybody predict USC and UCLA were going to run to the cold tundra of the Midwest? No. This still is going on. So there's no reason to close out possibilities.
Yeah. Well, Yeah, go ahead, Tony. Sorry, I keep cutting you off.
It's okay. Yeah, because I mean, you look at it, we've kind of moved away from a lot of those quote unquote, unspoken of geographic rules in quote that everybody in college football thought we would kind of follow. Like the ACC kind of takes a lot of the East Coast, but then that got a little bit broken up when Maryland and Rutgers came over into the Big Ten in 2014. So it's like, okay, but that's not terrible. It's not too much of an overreach. And it's like, all right, Pac-12 is in their little area. Big 12 is kind of mostly in the South, a little bit up in the Northwest with West Virginia, joining after the Big East fell. But it's like, yeah, when now you look and it's like, all right, Big 10 is primarily Midwest and California. It's like, it's sense. Crazy. And, as we've talked about, and I'm sure we'll still talk about because, nothing's been set yet. We're in talks with Oregon. We're in talks with Washington. So, I mean, of course, Notre Dame is still the big fish that the Big Ten's trying to reel in. I still don't know how Notre Dame is like. I know we're all boxed in on like every side. We're just gonna keep doing this until we absolutely have to do something, or we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. But no, I mean, I think Appalachian State. I could see them in the Big 12 or the ACC even. I mean, think about it. They're right there in North Carolina. You could have them in a UNC rivalry almost consistently. Them and Duke.
I don't think UNC wants to play them every year.
Probably not. UNC's like, not after last time. No. They could go face Clemson, though. That would be a good matchup.
I got to thinking about something about the Big Ten expanding out to California. Is that commercial that they show that they start at the Rose Bowl is still appropriate. They just got to throw in a couple of other graphics right there.
It's a
and
good
they can
point.
still run that whole.
I love the idea that the first two frames just kind of like jittery, just throw up UCLA and USD before it expands over.
Yeah. Well, they did it as quickly as they would be doing it as quickly as USC and UCLA ran to the Big Ten. So
it's true. Fair enough. So we got a lot of different areas we can go to. We can talk about some of these upsets to start. We could talk about Nebraska and Scott Frost. We could talk about what was the conversation of the best of the West. Now is just the mess in the West. Like there's a lot to talk about here in this show. Anybody have feelings where we start? We've already talked a little Appalachian. Do you just want to stay with upsets, or is Sam thinking Iowa here?
I'm thinking Iowa.
All right, let's go.
I want to get to
the West. Okay, I'll let you start then with the Iowa Hawkeyes.
I have totally shocked. I predicted the correct score. Now I had it the other way, but like this is embarrassing. Dalton, you shared some stats or the stats of it. Their touchdown drive was like from the opponent's 16-yard line.
Yeah, let me pull up the drive chart for the scoring drives that Iowa's had so far.
Which, mind you, is 2.
Correct.
2.
The only touchdown that Iowa has scored this year had their drive started at the opposing 16. You are correct. The only field goal that Iowa made during the Iowa State game, because they did make one during the South Dakota State game, but that drive started at the opposing 33-yard line. And in that drive, they gained 5 yards before settling for a 46-yarder on 4th and 5.
5 yards, and they had to hit a long field goal to get that field goal. I mean, this is what. Oh,
actually, forgive me. I got twisted. That is the field goal from South Dakota State.
Yeah.
So that is it. That's all the score.
I heard what you meant. It's not what you said, so that's why I just kept on moving. But something's got to happen with this, doesn't it? I mean, and with this, as stubborn as Kurt Ferentz is, I fear that in the next week or two, he could be ending his tenure. And if he's not willing to say, "Okay, son, sorry, I've got to fire you because this is unacceptable." This could be easily they're in a fight with Nebraska for last in the West. Like that's how bad I think Iowa is right now.
Tony?
Yeah, I agree. Like now, Sam got the score right, but I picked Iowa State for the upset.
That's right.
By at least 17, huh, Tony?
I did I did say 17. I was hoping. I was like,
at least. No. Let's say at least.
Well, I think what Tony could take away is how good Iowa's defense is. Like, it's a real defense there in Iowa City. But go on.
Yeah, like that's really kind of the upsetting part. Like, if you're an Iowa fan and, of course, just a Big Ten fan in general, it's like that defense has so much potential. And, we even talked about it kind of early on when the season first started, because I predicted the Iowa linebacker would have a great year, and I still think that they will. But the fact that, and we talked about it on game day, Petras has thrown 1 touchdown and 9 interceptions in his last, 8 games or something like that?
Yep.
And he's still your starter.
Yeah.
Like Sam said, something has to change. Whether it's, Ferentz, whether it's his son as the OC, whether it's Petras as the quarterback, something has to give, because that's just not acceptable.
Well, the one thing you've got to look at is who's making the decisions on who starts at quarterback. Because if you have a better option behind Petras, then who's making that choice of who's starting? Because somebody's got to pay for that. If there is a better quarterback on that roster right now, shame on the person that said we're putting him in and over him. So right there, he needs to lose his job if that's the case.
Well, at that point, I mean, even if you don't have a better option, I mean, can you really sit here and say, well, our best option will still get us, 1 touchdown and 9 interceptions? At this point, it's like I would try anything. Like, hey, whoever my second string guy is, you're going to be our starter. We're going to see what we got.
But what I'm saying is if they're better. What I'm saying is if that person is a better quarterback.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm sorry, but who's evaluating it if he is a better quarterback?
Which is a very fair point. And I believe the backup quarterback, I believe how you say the last name is Padilla. It's Alex Padilla. So we'll see what kind of happens. But from the Tuesday press conference that Iowa held, Kirk Ferentz announced that Spencer Petras is still going to be the starter heading
that's what I'm getting at.
And somebody asked the question that Sam's hitting on. Well, who's making this decision? And Kirk Ferentz decided not to get into those details. He just kind of stepped aside that question. So many people, especially in Iowa City, are starting to ask those questions and try and get to the core of, okay, who should be accountable? Because, look, I mean, we've talked a little bit about Spencer Petras, and I mean, it's really uncomfortable. At least I find it uncomfortable to kind of criticize the 20-year-old kid / man. He's in that period. And he's being told to go out there. And that's what, when boos were raining down from Kinnick Stadium, I mean, the Petras, it's not, he's still being put out there. So who should be feeling the accountability and the pressure from this disastrous situation? And nobody has really the answer yet, because so far Iowa has stepped aside from that bullet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just real quick on Spencer Petras' stats so far this year, he's 23 of 51 in the 2 games that he's played. He has a 45% completion rate. He's thrown 200 yards between both games. He's thrown 200 yards and 2 interceptions. So it's kind of like you said, Dalton, I don't feel as bad for, I do feel bad for Petras, sorry, because, he is
he's
going out there.
Spot.
Yeah, he's put in a bad spot because, while, like you said, he's young, he's kind of being thrown out to the wolves here. And, there's only so much he can do on his end. To me, I have to blame the OC and the head coach for 2 reasons. The head coach, because overall, at the end of the day, it's his responsibility. It's Luke Ferentz's job to either fire his OC, replace his OC, get in his OC's butt, telling him you need to change something. We have to do something different than whatever it is that you're doing right now. But also the OC, because again, it doesn't seem like you're playing to your quarterback strengths, or you're just we're throwing it's like they got all these little pieces of paper and just threw them in a hat with all the plays, and it's all right, we're gonna pick our 10 best plays, and that's what we're gonna do the whole game. We're not going to do anything different. You can't do that.
Can we think about one thing? And Dalton, we kind of touched upon this last week, was there are wide receiver weapons that have left Iowa and are doing big things at Purdue.
Yep.
So who missed that evaluation? I'm still stuck on who's evaluating, because they're making horrible, horrible choices. And if it's Kirk Ferentz's son, I don't remember his name. What's his name? Brian. If it's Brian Ferentz's choice on an evaluation, and he's had receiving weapons leave his program and go do good things elsewhere, and he's still only throwing for 200 yards in 2 games. Come on.
Which, let me help support your point real quick. I saw this tweet from Don Doxey on Twitter, and I'm not really sure who Don is, but he had tweeted this stat out that Charlie Jones at Iowa last season, the whole year, okay, whole season of work, 21 catches, 323 yards, 3 tutties.
He has to have close to that already after 2 games, doesn't he?
Charlie Jones threw 6 quarters.
Oh, 6
Purdue.
quarters, so a game and a half.
6 quarters, 21 catches, matching last year's, 286 yards. So he was 37 yards behind his season total at halftime last week. And
season 2.
Well, hang on, because we still got another stat.
Oh, geez.
4 touchdowns through 6 quarters. He already has more touchdowns in the first 6 quarters this season than he had the entire year in 2021 there in Iowa.
And you know what? That needs to be seen too. This should all be, to me anyways, all be just more and more evidence to give Kirk to say, look, Brian's got to go. We know he's your son. You love him, but you have to make this decision. And if Kirk says, well, I'm not going to do that, we may see him gone too. Yeah. Because this can't I mean, you have a defense that has to score points to win games. That's where we're at with this team right now. You have a defense that could win games if the offense could put 17 points on the board. The defense shuts people down. If you can just produce some points.
Yeah.
And they're not doing that. And it's not just, oh, this is 2 games. This is over the course of about most of last season.
Yep.
Yeah. Even if it was just like a mild upgrade to like a middle of the pack offense, like I feel like that would still put Iowa
top 10 in the Big Ten rather than the 14th.
Right. Like you would still be in contention and at least be in contention for the West right now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's like with this offense and much like Sam said, you know, if Kirk doesn't want to fire his son, which I don't think he will, and a lot of people have been kind of mentioning it because, you know, as we've seen, Kirk just kind of does his own thing. Like he's been running this program since 1999. I don't think he's about to change now. Mm-hmm. It's like, yeah, it might just be a package deal. Now, whoever their defensive coordinator is, keep him. Like he stays.
Bill Parker.
But everybody else goes.
Yeah. I mean, I totally understand. And real quick, because I could see Sam's got something here. Let's get ready to get to a quick timeout and get ready for the second quarter, because let's talk more about what the rest of the West is.
Yes.
So we talk about Iowa, and Sam had mentioned that this team could be battling with Nebraska for last place in the Big Ten West. Well, let's get to Nebraska, because after week 2 and a loss to Georgia Southern up there at the top of your screen, if you're on video with us, 45-42, Nebraska not only falls to a 1-2 mark, but ends up firing head coach Scott Frost. And it's something that you could kind of see coming for a short period of time now. But if you go back to when the hire happened, you thought it was a home run. And I say you because that's the vast majority. A lot of people, including myself, thought, hey, look at this. He helped UCF back to that, air quote, national championship.
He got him a national championship in Central Florida. Yeah.
And then goes to Nebraska, and you're like, this makes complete sense. It's going to work out. It's going to be great for Lincoln. And it just didn't end up working out. There's a couple things I want to talk about here, but first I'll open it up for you two. Whatever it is that stuck out about Georgia Southern knocking off Nebraska.
I think it was just the fact that, you know, the expectations for Nebraska were so high, because they do always get a lot of good transfers that come into Nebraska. You know, you got the wide receiver from Texas that came in along with Casey Thompson. You had a couple really good transfers that come in. You know, they lose at least to a division rival at the beginning of the year. It's like, okay, that's okay. You can make that work. But then they lose to Georgia Southern of all teams, and it's like, again, this is one of those, it was a pay-to-play game. And, of course, we saw all of those games, all of those teams that they dished out like over $1 million to these schools to play, Notre Dame, all of them. Every single one of the teams that hosted lost. So it's like, this is just mind blowing. But it's the fact that, Scott Frost couldn't take this team to at least beat the teams that he should, beat the teams outside of the Big Ten that aren't necessarily, powerhouse teams. Like Nebraska this weekend faces Oklahoma. We know, and who knows how that's going to end now that Scott Frost is not the head coach, luckily. But it's like the underwhelmingness that Scott Frost was, because like you said, Dalton, he took UCF to like a national championship, and I saw his record with Jameis Winston, and with Jameis Winston, his winning record was just insane. And then ever since without Jameis Winston, it was just pretty much Nebraska's winning record of what, like 15-36 in
16-31.
16-31. Darn it, I was close. But it's sad, but I'm also kind of excited. And I'll touch on this a little bit more when we get to our takes. Just the potential coaches that are out there for Nebraska to get now to hopefully turn them around. And it is kind of sad that, I don't know if you guys have paid attention, but the last two coaches, well, at least big name coaches that have come back to their alma mater in the Big Ten have underwhelmed. You look at Jim Harbaugh at Michigan, underwhelmed, and you look at Scott Frost at Nebraska, is completely underwhelmed. And it's like, okay, I get the fan favoriteness, I get the sentimentality, and they've had success in other places. I don't necessarily think that correlates well whenever you come back home, because then the expectations are twice as high. And if you fail, that's one less chance that you have to try to get that team back to where it needs to be. At least with Jim Harbaugh, Michigan, I guess, is a little bit more understanding than Nebraska has been, because, really for Nebraska, it's like, well, the West is open. You have a chance. At least for Michigan, they're like, yeah, we have this, buzzsaw that is Ohio State. Like, as long as you get close, we can work with that. So it's kind of sad, because I liked Scott Frost. I'm assuming he'll probably get another job. He might have to work his way back up to head coach. But it is kind of disappointing. Although I did like the way that Scott Frost went out of the building. I'm sure you guys have seen it on TV. And for those that haven't, Scott Frost in a backpack, he gets on the stair rails of the stadium and just slides down and walks away.
So that had happened like a week or so before, and now that video, everybody's surfacing right as he gets fired. And so it's just lining up. Really unfortunate. And real quick before Sam jumps in, you had mentioned that Scott Frost with Jameis Winston, but I think you meant Mackenzie Milton, correct? Just to tidy that.
I thought I had saw one with Jameis Winston that he had done like fantastic with Jameis. I'll look.
I don't think he coached Jameis, but you can check that. But I think it's Mackenzie Milton, just for the folks at home. Sam, go ahead, jump in.
Let's think about something. I mean, honestly, Scott Frost got fired by luck, because of luck. Because if we think about the games that they lost last year, let's say they go 7-1 in those games.
But hang on, Sam, just for a moment, because I know you have this old school mindset and persona a lot.
Yeah, okay.
But hang on. Let's redefine luck, because a lot of people would say, well, that's the winning factor. That's what makes winners or losers.
There's good luck and bad luck.
And you're going with luck. Okay, go ahead.
There's good luck and bad luck. So their luck of not having those, or lack thereof luck, let's say that way. Mm-hmm. There's lack of luck and luck. So that they had zero luck last year and lost 8 games by less than a touchdown, right? They go 7-1 in those games. Scott Frost's record is flip-flopped, and he's near 500. Are we having this conversation today? Probably
Absolutely not. No.
Because they probably win the West last year, because Iowa backed into that.
Correct.
And Nebraska probably wins the division last year and gets, housed by Ohio State or Michigan. I mean, but yeah, I mean, so he honestly got fired because he has zero luck. Like, the last year's team had zero luck, and it did not start well this year either.
And I suppose the point of contention I have is, I would argue some of these weren't just the fate of bad luck as much as it was the coach putting the team in bad spots.
Okay, and that's fair.
I witnessed in East Lansing, Nebraska with a 20-13 lead. And with 5 minutes left in the game, the special teams, the punt coverage, didn't know which end they were supposed to go to, which side of the field. And Jaden Reed from Michigan State scores a touchdown that ties it up and puts it in overtime for them to win the game. And then you go back to this opening weekend of the season against Northwestern and Ireland, up 11, you onside kick, you don't score again, and Northwestern takes all the momentum they had, or that you had, and puts it in their own pocket and ends up winning the game. I feel like it has been mismanaged for a while. Okay. So although I do believe there are instances where it's been bad luck, I think a lot of it really is a look in the mirror.
Okay. And that's fair, because I didn't evaluate Nebraska's season last year. I just see the end product and go, oh my gosh, really? They're a couple of plays of winning that game.
Fair. Absolutely.
Which they still are, but it's because of bad coaching that put them in that position where they were behind or they didn't get that luck, Yep.
So
okay.
let's talk too real quick about the Scott Frost buyout, which Tony did, just to circle back and tie the loop. Did you end up finding that?
Yeah, I don't know why I thought James once. I was like, wait, he played at Florida State. That's my see, kids. This is why you double check your work before you do this. Like,
here's the thing. Here's the thing. That's not Big Ten. That's ACC. So
that's right.
True. That's probably why.
Okay. So Scott Frost, his buyout, $15 million gets paid to Scott Frost, and that's the video Tony referenced that a lot of people are putting as he's sliding down the staircase rails with $15 million in his pocket. Again, for some of the listeners who aren't aware of the contract situation, had Nebraska waited until October 1st, the contract gets different. His buyout would drop to $7.5 million. So Nebraska, if the Huskers would have been willing to wait 2 to 3 weeks at the time when they made the firing, they would have saved $7.5 million. What do you folks make of that?
Let me jump on this first, Tony. I think it was a great move, because if they were really set that they didn't want Scott Frost as their coach, why would they put their players through 2 to 3 more games worth of that if they know that they're making the move? So $7.5 million is worth it to make sure and send the message that, look, we're dedicated to winning. We think we have the winners here potentially, and we think this is the best move. Doesn't matter how much it cost us. Mm-hmm. So I think that I personally think that it was a statement by Trev Alberts, the AD, to say, look, the money doesn't matter. We want to win now, or we want to get back to winning it now. So that may not happen this year, but that's what they're dedicated to do. So I think it was a good move. Why for $7.5 million? I mean, you could say, like, look, we're waiting 18 more days and then you're fired. Come on, let's just let him have his $15 million. Just let him have it and let's get going. And I think that's what Trev Alberts decided.
Yeah. And not only that, kind of, I was getting ready to say to your point, Sam, you look at the players and the production, like the production is still there on the field. Like I was looking at the stats just now. So in 3 games that Casey Thompson has played, he's 97 attempts, 62 completions. He's got about a 64% completion rating. He's thrown 866 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. And the receiving game for Nebraska is insane. And I want to partially give that credit to their interim coach right now, Mickey Joseph, who was LSU's wide receiver coach from 2019 to 21. So, of course, Coach Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Terrence Marshall, probably a little bit of Thaddeus Moss, even though he's a tight end. But the stats for their top 3 wide receivers. So Trey Palmer and Marcus Washington have both played in 3 games. Trey Palmer has 18 receptions, 231 yards, but no touchdowns. Marcus Washington has 10 receptions, 181 yards, 0 touchdowns. And then Isaiah Garcia Castaneda has 4 receptions for 120 yards and 1 touchdown. So the production is there. Like this is a good Nebraska team. And it's one of those, I kind of hate it whenever for coaches, it's like, oh, there's kind of the end of the tunnel, because then it's like, okay, now I'm going to coach the best I've ever coached. So yeah, in those next 15 days, maybe he wins both games in just dominating fashion, and Nebraska just looks like the best team in the Big Ten
Then
West.
you can't fire him because then all of a sudden he's turned it around.
Yeah, but then again, as soon as that happens, the minute that he drops, it's like, oh, well, we should have done this a long time ago. We should have already fired. So that's where I think, much to your point, I think it was a good idea. Just kind of rip the Band-Aid off now, get it over with, because it's not going to do you any good if he stays there. And again, who knows what Mickey Joseph can do? Because again, you have the talent. It just seems like, and we've seen that with all sorts of teams. They could put the pieces there, but they can't get everything to click together. And that's okay.
Well, and it's hard to go home. So Scott Frost may go somewhere else and be just fine.
Yeah.
But coming home, you've got to make those decisions, and maybe you overthink a little bit. I don't know that happened to Scott Frost, but it's possible that could be something that happened, that it was so much pressure, because how do you take somebody like UCF and coach them the way you did to a hypothetical or actual national championship one year? I mean, how does that happen? You don't do it by accident, and it's not just the players. You know what I mean? So he's not a bad coach.
No,
I'm excited.
And I don't feel bad for him because he got $15 million.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't feel bad at all.
I'm glad this conversation has played out this way, because I think we're going to have an interesting discussion now. And I do want Tony to hold the thought, though, where he looks at the rest of the Nebraska season, because I do want to talk about the whole West in general in a moment. But going back to this buyout and Nebraska paying the full $15 million instead of waiting 2-3 weeks to get it to $7.5 million, I'm on the other side of the fence, which makes this a good conversation. The reason why is, and look, Nebraska is not the only example. Money gets thrown around for buyouts of coaches all the time. And I think going back to 2005, I saw the stat that was tweeted for Nebraska. Let me make sure I give credit. Brad Crawford from Twitter said, with Scott Frost firing, Nebraska has paid more than $50 million in buyout money since 2005 to failed football and basketball coaches. Now, that's a lot. And I know normally we see these numbers and we just kind of carry on. Like that's such an excess, and in terms of like an overall scheme of things, looking at college athletics, such a waste of money and resources that goes into those buyout contracts. That's a whole nother conversation. But coming off the tail end of the pandemic, where you saw a lot of video coordinators, you saw a lot of different directors, videographers inside the athletic departments whose salaries aren't even close to that, having positions eliminated and wiped out because schools were telling you, we just can't afford it right now. You're seeing programs get wiped out across the country where they say, sorry, we just can't allocate the resources. But this program decided we can't wait, at the time, 20 days to fire our head coach. We got to get rid of him now. And to me, given the context of what we've seen in terms of just absolutely wasting away people's livelihoods that have been in those athletic departments, that to me is what makes that gross. I saw your hand raised, Sam. Go ahead, jump in.
Now, this is a serious, like, I'm part of a not-for-profit committee for a holiday Christmas display light drive-through thing. Okay.
Ooh, I kind of want to go to that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. You should come down. We could take you to it. But what we do is we get donations from places, and if they earmark it specifically for something, we can't use it for anything else. Or do we know if the Nebraska University itself paid that, or was it donations from alums with that earmarked specifically?
I don't have that answer. That's a good point, though.
Because by law, you can't do anything with that money other than what it is earmarked for. Correct. So if you have donors or alumni, friends of the program, say, here's $5 million, do it towards Scott Frost's buyout. Hey, here's another 5. Oh, okay. So all in all, we had 14 million of it covered by donors. We as a university are paying out $1 million. So it's not. And I'm not taking away from your example, because you're absolutely right. There's money that's wasted all over the place, and people losing jobs who make much less, and you're buying out for this. But if you have that donorship with it earmarked, you can't do anything with that money other than buy them out.
It's a great point, and I'm glad you brought that up. And it's a really good point. I would just say, in general, if you're able to make up the $7.5 million during that pandemic, there's no excuse then to be cutting other student athletes programs and taking it away from them.
I don't disagree with that at all.
And I think we found our middle ground here. So I'm pleased with how this.
Yeah, how'd you like that? We were adulting right there. Like we pulled that one off. You thought there might be a disagreement, and we worked right through that, buddy.
Well, no, this is kind of
we could have disagreed. That would have been fine too.
This is the opposite of what a lot of sports media talk is, but this is a real nice, genuine conversation. Tony, are you kind of in the kumbaya? Where are you at now?
Yeah, no, I mean, I kind of agree, because again, it makes more sense if it's alumni, because you think about it, alumni, these are guys that have played there, that have had a lot of success there. They've gone off and made a whole bunch of their own money. They're probably in the same boat. They're like, okay, because it's not like the NFL, because the NFL, some people are always confused about those salaries. Those coaches' salaries come out of the owner's pocket. They pay them, like, that money is guaranteed whether they're there or not. Like, they already get that money. So yeah, for universities, that's not the case. And if you're alumni, you don't want to see your team fail like that, because that's a lot of crap that you have to get from other people. And, for you, it is an investment, because it's like, yeah, this is my team. This is who I'm proud of. So it's like, yeah, we need to buy old Scott out. Like, we can afford to dish it out now. And like, Sam said, if it's, a couple, 2 or 3, here's, $4 or $5 million each, or heck, it could be 20 of them. Like, hey,
didn't they start a GoFundMe page during that game for him? I heard in passing. No, seriously, I heard in passing on the radio. Somebody said something about a GoFundMe page for the buyout of Scott Frost.
And I thought I saw at least petitions being made. It was one of those deals too.
There's always at least one petition or at least one GoFundMe whenever the team is going downhill. It's like, no, it's
and look, see now by law,
the money raised.
See now by law, if they would have raised $10,000 and gave it to the university with it earmarked as the part of the buyout for Scott Frost, that's what it would have to go towards.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so real quick, because I know we're running heavy here. Big Ten West.
Not as normal.
I know. Well, for as much as I want to throw in here before we get to halftime.
Sure.
Big Ten West, we've talked about it. Iowa right now, more punts than points. 16 punts, 14 points. That's the year totals for the Hawkeyes. We talked about Nebraska losing the head coach. Purdue, we haven't talked much about recently, but you had the opening weekend where you had Penn State on the ropes, mismanaged the clock, you could probably say, end up losing that game, carrying on since. Minnesota, we haven't seen the Gophers play anybody yet. We don't really know how to evaluate Minnesota. And then finally, Wisconsin loses at home to Wazoo this past weekend. There it is, 17-14. If you're joining us on a visual medium up at the top, Wazoo gets the win in Madison. Guys, we had this conversation at the beginning of the year, who's going to win the Big Ten West, and we all kind of took different interpretations and tried to dissect this thing. Through 2 weeks, I still have zero idea what to make of the Big Ten West, and all I know is somebody has to go play in Indianapolis. Who do you guys even kind of default to at this point?
I mean, to me, I still default to Minnesota.
Okay.
I know, like you said, they haven't really played anybody, and they haven't. But it's like looking at everybody else.
I was going to say Nebraska lost to Georgia Southern.
They lost to Georgia Southern. Wisconsin lost to Washington State, which, that was also due to, in part, of Washington State's running back. If I remember right, it's Watson is actually Watson is not the transfer from Wisconsin. One of their running backs that did really well is actually a Wisconsin transfer.
That is correct. Let me look at the name. I can't remember.
I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he had a great game against Wisconsin. And a lot of it was Washington State just decided that they were going to just take care of the football. And that's really all they did was, they didn't ask their quarterback to do a whole lot. They were able to run the ball effectively. And it just seemed like Wisconsin is still trying to find their identity on the offense. I know you had talked about Dalton, their running back. a little bit earlier in the season to kind of watch for
Braylon
him.
Allen.
Allen.
And by the way, Watson was the correct name, Tony, just to help out there.
Okay.
It was Watson. So
I saw he's from like Texas. I'm like, no, he's not. They said he's from Wisconsin. No, he's not. It kind of surprises me. Like I said, and I mean, I know I joked about it the first time I was on here that I didn't like Wisconsin because of my ex-wife. But it's like offensively, I still don't really care for Wisconsin. And Minnesota's like the only team in the West now that has a quote unquote clean record. And I mean, other than Purdue, I feel like those are really the only two teams really competing for the West right now.
I love the idea of get out of Madison because of my ex-wife, stay out because of Graham Mertz. Like,
yes.
Yes. It's like,
every time.
Go ahead, Sam.
I still think it's Purdue. They played against Penn State, and look, we passed around the power rankings of the Big Ten, and the top 4 teams are Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State.
Yep.
So the 4th best team considered in the power rankings, Purdue had them beat and just played sloppy. So I'm still not worried that they are going to clean that up, and they're going to, I think they'll beat Wisconsin, because Wisconsin right now, unless they do something, they're going to get tripped up. And I think Purdue might do that too.
Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's important to remember too, when we talk about Purdue, the big deal, because every Big Ten West team instantly looks to see what their crossover games are against the East to really kind of curtail their chances and their odds of winning the division. Purdue had Penn State to open the weekend. In the other 2, they really got a good luck of the draw on. So Purdue can absolutely handle the schedule in front of them. Yeah. I'm pulling up Minnesota's now because Minnesota has Colorado at home this weekend. And then after that, I mean, that's the end of the non-conference, so they'll get into Big Ten play, and we'll learn a little bit more about Minnesota September 24th next weekend when they go to Spartan Stadium. They're going to take on Michigan State. And then Minnesota has Purdue at home, at Illinois, at Penn State, home against Rutgers, at Nebraska, home against Northwestern, home against Iowa, at Wisconsin. So the crossovers are Michigan State, Penn State, and Rutgers. That's not going to be the easiest.
That's a difficult one.
Yeah,
comparatively, if you compare Purdue to Minnesota.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Purdue has by far, because it's IU and Maryland, I believe, are their crossovers.
Purdue's got the best possible schedule.
Yeah.
And by the way, Maryland's not going to be a pushover this year.
No, I'm not saying that, but they're the easier of the
they're the easier of the East
to go against.
No argument. It's getting real, the competition and the depth a little bit of the East. Maryland isn't far behind with Talia Tagovailoa, and those are NFL receivers that Maryland has. So that's a handful. Even
it's not a gimme by any means. I'm not saying that it's a gimme, but it's an easier game than going to the horseshoe.
But it used to be a gimme, and I guess that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah. I don't disagree at all. I mean, and we talked about this last week that Nebraska and Purdue had the best crossovers. Well, now it's not going to matter for Nebraska, I don't think. No. I think they're going to be kind of a.
Are you guys comfortable writing Nebraska off?
I don't know.
They've got
honestly, I don't know, because you know what? If you get those hard, the luck, the luck that they were lacking all of a sudden because of coaching decisions go in their favor, they might turn things around and be 8-4 or whatever. But
here's the rest of Nebraska's schedule. So they host Oklahoma this coming weekend.
Oof.
Then they're on their bye week, and then they host Indiana. Then they go to Rutgers.
IU?
They go to Purdue. Then they host Illinois, and then they end their season with hosting Minnesota. So I'm comfortable with writing them off, because I feel like out of that schedule, maybe a win against Rutgers, maybe a win against Illinois. IU kind of a toss-up. and then I have them losing to Oklahoma, Purdue, and Minnesota. So it's like
And for this instance, go ahead, take Oklahoma out, because if we're just looking at Big Ten, I mean, as bad as Nebraska's been, they're 0-1. Like that's you can do something still, but Tony's comfortable writing them off.
Purdue's
and that's
0-1.
fine. Yeah. Well,
Purdue's 0-1, and we're still right. Well, yeah, it's not divisional, but
it's
still 0-1 in Big Ten.
Now.
Huh?
It's such a mess. I don't really know what to do with this. And go ahead.
When it comes to Nebraska, I honestly, they could have had a 10-win season last year with ease.
Yep.
So they didn't like completely lose their whole entire offense and defense and returners and everything. Like they have returning players from that team. So it's feasible to see that they could pick off some of these bigger teams that are, that you automatically kind of think with how they're performing last year record-wise and how they've performed this year record-wise, that's going to be an L because they've been so horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
but
I forgot.
Now they've got those players in place, and maybe you have a different coaching decisions made to where they're winning a few of those. They could be 6-7 wins, honestly.
Oh, sorry, I missed the last 3 games. It didn't fully load. So after they host Minnesota, then they go to Michigan, then they host Wisconsin, and then they go to Iowa. I mean, they're going to win against Iowa.
Well, Iowa could be 3-0 in a barn burner at the end.
Yeah,
65-yard field goal or something.
So it's going to be entertaining nonetheless.
It's the only game that doesn't go inside the red zone.
I mean, if you love college football, which we do, and really you love it because it's so perfectly imperfect. I mean, that's what college football is. It's what makes it the best sport. This is going to be a ride you're going to want to be on for the next 2 months, the Big Ten West, just to figure out. You're going to have so many moments you're like, what? Why?
How many of those games are you going to look at and go, oh, my God, this is horrible football? You know what I mean? Like,
Quite a few. Yeah, it makes it all the more fun. All right, we're running heavy. Let's get to a halftime break. When we come back, we'll preview this weekend's games.
See you in a minute. You are listening to Big Ten Plus 4, hosted on Anchor and StreamYard.
I'm Richie, a.k.a. Midnight Agent Raw.
I'm Devin, a.k.a. Special Delivery Dev.
We're the Super Media Bros Podcast. And each week, we give a comedically informative take on movies,
music,
television,
pro wrestling,
and much more. Check us out at supermediabrospodcast.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you can listen to podcasts. Shades on.
We're off.
Hi, I'm Sam.
I'm Richie.
I'm Little Matt.
And here in the 500 Section Lounge, we are 3 dads who host a family-friendly weekly podcast.
Yep, we laugh, we go on tangents, and we talk to great guests.
Tangents? I don't know what you're talking about with that. You know, there are gases leaking.
All right, okay.
Yeah, we have legendary conversations from sports to history and everything in between.
So be on the lookout for what we do next.
And always be there to
grab a listen. I did the double tap. You didn't see it. Did you see it pop up and then go away? Because I accidentally double tapped it.
Visually, it looked great. It just the tweet didn't come through. All right, third quarter, second half. Let's get it underway. We got some big games coming up this weekend, and what is one of the kind of final non-conference weekends, you could say. We're going to get a lot of Big Ten games starting next weekend. But this weekend, there's some bigger matchups taking place. Let's go ahead and start off with. What do you guys have a preference? Sam, you got graphics. Go ahead. Hit
I want you dealer choice. So you pick. You decide which way we go right now.
Let's go Michigan State and Washington then.
Boom. There it is.
Here, Michigan State, Washington. Heading out to Seattle and seeing what Michigan State has in store for the Huskies. Now, keep in mind, the odds right now have Washington as a favorite. Michigan State is ranked 11th in the country, 9th in the coaches poll.
11th.
And right now, Washington is favored in this game. I think it's 3.5 points. So
we automatically get 3 when you're hosting, right?
Correct. So 3.5.
So they're saying it's a pick'em game, basically.
Kind of, yeah. But for an 11th ranked team and a non-ranked team to be in a pick'em, it's kind of bizarre. What do you guys take away here?
Well, my question is I know next to nothing about Washington other than
Well, let me start here then.
Let
Let me throw this in for you because their quarterback's a familiar face for the listeners. Michael Penix Jr., the old Indiana quarterback, has transferred there. He's teamed up with his old offensive coordinator from his Bloomington days. Michael Penix Jr. is there. Also, last year, Washington's secondary was the best pass defense in the country. So there's some different things to work on here. Now go ahead.
Okay. Well, that makes a little bit more sense, I guess. But what we've got to look at is I don't think maybe they worry about whether or not Michigan State's gotten pressure and stuff without blitzing. You know what I mean? So, like, they've got their dogs that if they're going to try to run, they can put a spy on Penix and follow him around because I know he does like to run. But like if they can get that pressure, the defense pressure without having to blitz the pressure, they can spy on Penix, and I think that gives Michigan State the edge. Now, the secondary has been the issue with Michigan State's defense, so it's whether or not they can get Penix on the move quicker, so it's not reliant on the secondary to make plays or too many plays, let's say it that way, to where I think Washington maybe is a little bit better even though they're unranked than what people are probably thinking they are, but I don't understand. I would take Michigan State in the points.
And by the way, you talk about that defense, and you mentioned spying on Penix. Michigan State's linebacking core, even with losing Darius Snow, is still a great core and a fast core, one of the faster linebacking groups they've had in years. Tony, what do you got?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of the same way with Sam. It's like I didn't really know a whole lot about Washington until you said that. I know if you look at it from a Pac-12 perspective, I mean, they're quote unquote one of the better teams in the Pac-12, North, even though the Pac-12 got rid of divisions. There's kind of a reason why the Big Ten is even flirting with them coming in. But it is crazy that Michigan State being ranked 11th and they're underdogs going into Washington, which is a little crazy. I was also trying to look up what their statistics were for their O-line last year, at least, like where they ranked, just because I wanted to see like potentially how that O-line would do against, Michigan State's pass rush. I will say, as far as, Michael Penix, I don't think he's a bad quarterback because I do remember, that COVID year with Indiana. I mean, he did fantastic. I mean, they took Ohio State down to the wire. There's a lot of people said that Indiana should have represented the East that year in the Big Ten championship.
By their original rules, they should have.
Yes, and I was getting ready to say they, of course, changed the rules for Ohio State to go in there. Which I know a lot of people, they give Ohio State a lot of grief about, that they literally changed the rules for you guys to get you guys in. But I mean, it's a little bit crazy. I think Michigan has the better offense. Now, like Dalton said, last year their secondary was, Michigan State.
Thank you.
Sorry, I know.
I could see I could see your ears lighting up like turning red. Yeah.
I see Michigan State's offense being better, just purely because, again, nothing against Penix. I don't know if Washington at least has the offensive power to be able to keep up with Michigan State more than anything.
And by the way, guys, when we start talking about Michigan State's defense, it's time for the country to notice Jacoby Winman. Like, that is the name that people need to start locking in. Jacoby Winman. So far this season, through 2 games, he has 6.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, 4 forced fumbles. He leads the country in all 3 categories. Seriously, everybody, put eyes on Jacoby Winman. Number 4, he's the transfer from UNLV. This guy he's going to be a pro's pro. Like, it's absolutely start paying attention and buy stock in him now. And by the way, for Michigan State's offense, I know Tony was talking a little bit about that. Broussard and Berger last week running for 5 touchdowns between the 2 of them. It's a big thumbs up. You're starting to really see what that combo in that backfield. We talked a lot about the depth before the year, what it actually can look like. All right, real quick, we got a couple other games we want to move to. Penn State at Auburn. Folks, what do we think here?
Do you want to go first, Sam, or you want me to?
Go ahead.
By the way, Penn State favored by 3 points on the road here for this one.
Yeah, this is one I'm a little bit more shocked about, because I'm like, how are you going to say Michigan State's not favored when they're the 11th ranked team in the nation, but Penn State going down into Auburn, which, I don't know about you guys, if you've ever watched the Iron Bowl, especially if Auburn hosts, that is a crazy college environment.
Iron Bowl? What is this Iron Bowl you speak of?
But for Penn State to go down there, and again, like we kind of talked about earlier when they faced Purdue was the better team. It wasn't like Penn State just went in there and, had their way with everything. This is one of those, to me, I have Auburn. Auburn should be more heavily favored than what they are. Auburn has almost always consistently been a team that, even though they're not always ranked, or they're not, the prettiest or flashiest team, they get wins. They may not be pretty wins, but they get wins. And I think Auburn beats Penn State pretty easily.
Okay. Sam?
Is this a knock on Purdue? Because your example of, they went and played Purdue. Come on. Maybe Purdue's that good, and Penn State's really that good. And then, because every time I see rankings for the East, Penn State's number 3.
Yeah, I don't know why. That's
because they say that Penn State is that good. So maybe this is accurate. I have Michigan State higher than Penn State, but that doesn't mean that I'm right. When they go play on the field, we may be talking next week that, oh my gosh, Penn State went and, thumped Auburn and Michigan State got beat. Well, maybe I'm wrong with it's tough. Penn State's good. I mean, they're really, really good. It's just, my problem is I don't know how good Auburn really is.
And again, excuse me, as we talk about teams and kind of having a hard time gauging them given what they've played so far, Auburn's played Mercer and San Jose State. There's not a lot to take away yet.
Right. So, I mean, they went through a horrid offseason with the whole thing with their coach, and, was he going to get fired? Is he, on the hot seat? Now he's fine. All this. And then, by the way, you better win, because if not, your butt's out the door. I mean, I don't know anybody that has a worse outlook on this season than him coming into it. Like, if I don't produce wins, I'm going to be out on my butt.
And you got to remember too, he lost his star quarterback to Oregon in the offseason. Bo Nix is gone. So
that's right.
So, I mean, that's why I don't know about Auburn. I mean, they could be good. I don't know, though.
And look, if Auburn's going to win this game, they're going to have to be able to run the football, because Penn State's secondary so far, I mean, again, they lost Jaquan Brisker to the NFL this past year. And when that happened, I was like, wow, that's going to be a void. It's not. Like, Penn State has so much depth in that secondary. Penn State's only allowing 48% passes to be completed at this point in time so far.
Real quick,
through 2 weeks. Yeah.
This should be a knock on Iowa even more, because Charlie Jones still had 12 catches and 130 plus yards against Penn State's secondary.
Yep.
He wouldn't have had 10 yards if he was at Iowa.
Yeah, that is correct.
So, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
But so if Auburn's going to win, it's going to have to be by controlling the trenches, which, by the way, Penn State's front, it's a good group there on defense. Yeah. So I'm not sure how much I really see that. Where I think it gets into trouble and where I'm lacking knowledge is Auburn's front seven. I don't know how talented they are, but I know Penn State's offensive line is an issue. And if Auburn's going to win the game, I imagine that's where it is. Exploiting the line of scrimmage on that side of the ball. That's how I think that plays. All right, real quick, we'll do one more before we get to the fourth quarter. Purdue, Syracuse. The odds makers have this even. Have this a pick 'em between Purdue and Syracuse. Tony, we'll start with you. Well, actually, Sam's the Purdue guy, right?
So let's the Boilermaker.
Let's boiler up with Sam. What do we got?
I'm taking Purdue and the points since they're not giving any. I think Purdue's better than what they're 1-1. They lost to Penn State. They're better than that. I honestly, they should be 2-0. They should be low ranked, my opinion, but there were some hiccups. They kind of corrected those with a get better game last week against Indiana State. And I think while I don't hate Syracuse, I just think that Purdue is going to be the better team. They're not going to have to deal with weather. And will Syracuse pack the Carrier Dome and make it loud? Maybe. But I think Purdue has just got the better offense, and I think they're going to win.
Tony?
Yeah. I don't really know a lot about Syracuse as far as how they've done this season. Again, they're not one of those teams. They're never bad, but they haven't really like stood out to me at least in football in years. So it's like I would take Purdue pretty easily again, just because of Purdue's offense. And we kind of saw last week when Purdue beat up on poor little old Indiana State. The Indiana State game was kind of a revenge because, like Sam said, they had Penn State beat for the most part throughout the entirety of that game. It just came down to penalties and whatnot, and just kind of more luck in that too. But I like Purdue's offense. I don't think Syracuse is going to be able to match that by any means, because Purdue, I feel like, is in one of those positions right now. They can do quick strike scoring abilities, and Purdue's pass rush. Even though they lost, George Karlaftis to the Chiefs in the NFL. That pass rush by committee has been pretty good. And I mean, they gave Penn State a lot of disruption in that game, and that was a much better offense for them to face. So I like Purdue in this one. I'm gonna take Purdue by 7.
What I want to mention about this game, or Sam, did you have something real quick?
No.
What I want to mention about this game, the over-under right now is currently set at 58.5. And I would be stunned if it goes under. Between Purdue's offense and Syracuse, right now, one thing you do need to know about Syracuse for the listeners at home, Garrett Schrader is the quarterback for the Cuse. Right now, he's completing more than 79% of his passes. Better than 79% of his passes. He's thrown for 528 yards, 5 TDs, no interceptions, and this is against Louisville and an at UConn game. But the point being that Garrett Schrader can light it up through the air. So between him and Aiden O'Connell, I think we're set in for maybe a bit of a firework game between these two. And I think maybe ultimately it does go Purdue's way. I just trust their offense more, and I trust what Purdue has with Braum. But nonetheless, this should be a high-scoring affair. I think this should be a fun one to watch if you're looking for something on your Saturday.
It'll definitely keep you on your toes.
Yeah. All right, real quick, let's move to the fourth quarter and get to our headlines.
Well, once I can find it, Dalton.
There's the whistle, and we're ready to go with the headlines. So, as always, we start off with Tony Hollinsworth and the Tony Tribune, right? Not Times?
Yep.
Tony Tribune? Okay.
Yep. And I'm actually prepared this time. I came prepared.
Time, jeez.
So I know, right? I think this is a first.
Yeah.
So I kind of mentioned it earlier. So with Scott Frost being fired, there are now 3 potential names that have been thrown out there to be, actually 4, if you want to count this last one, I'll throw him in there, to be Nebraska's next head coach. That is current interim head coach Mickey Joseph. He has the best odds. Matt Campbell from Iowa State is second as far as being the next potential head coach. Mark Stoops, Bob Stoops' brother, the current head coach of Kentucky, also has odds to be the coach. Now, with Mark Stoops, there's maybe a little bit more of a kind of hiccup there because just last year, Stoops agreed to an extension through 2027 with Kentucky. So would they potentially get him? I don't know. And then, of course, the man's name has always been thrown out there, I think, with every college.
Jim Harbaugh?
No, not Jim Harbaugh. Urban Meyer has also been named as a possible name to Nebraska, which I'm like, no, Urban, just don't do that. This whole NFL experience tainted everything about your legacy, unfortunately. Don't do that to yourself. Just stay where you're at. Don't make things any worse than what they are. But out of these, I like Mickey Joseph. I also do like Mark Stoops to Nebraska. I like Mickey Joseph just because, again, I like what he's been able to do with Nebraska's offense. I hope he's able to continue to do that. Now with Stoops, I kind of like Stoops a little bit better only because somebody brought it up of what more can you really do at Kentucky? Kentucky has been very good the last couple of years. He's one of the few coaches that has a 10-win season, like 2 of the 4 10-win seasons in Kentucky's history, and he owns half of them, at least for football, because I don't know about you, gents. I've always known Kentucky as a basketball school. Football, they have not really been good until the last couple of years. And if you look at Kentucky, where they're at just being in the SEC, you're not beating Bama. You're not beating Georgia. You're not beating Florida on a bad day. Well, actually, you did beat Florida on a bad day.
Beat Florida.
Backtrack that quickly.
But again, you're not getting far in the SEC. So if I'm Stoops, it's like, yeah, you're doing great for Kentucky. You're great where you're at. You would probably have a better chance winning the Big Ten and the Big Ten West with Nebraska than you would staying in the SEC. But that's just me.
Well, I think it's a great point. The only kind of but I would throw in there is, as conference realignment's happening, division realignment's going to happen too. So we don't know exactly what Nebraska is going to be playing in and what that looks like. Because if they're with Ohio State, Michigan State at some point, it's a little more tough sledding.
It's gonna get extra ugly, and I always spell that ULGY, Olgie.
For why? Why am I missing
when it's
that?
extra special ugly? That
Extra
would be
special,
what
yeah.
when Nebraska
Okay.
being in.
Good enough.
ULGY.
But
Yeah.
interesting what Tony brings there for the next Nebraska coach. I'm fascinated to see what Trev Alberts did. And Trev Alberts did say during his press conference where he talked about this, he said, look, you're going to hear rumors. You're going to hear that I spoke to so-and-so. And he goes, and it's probably true. That doesn't mean I'm offering the job. Like, he set the context.
He'll talk to anybody.
And set the
Why
standard.
not?
He goes, I know a lot of coaches from my time doing TV, doing all these different things. I'm going to call a lot of people. So that's the perspective. When you start hearing names, don't start freaking out that's going to be the next guy. That's an important note as well.
You know, even though you say that, there will still be people that freak out.
100%. I'm doing my best with damage control. It just doesn't really.
That's when you can say, look, I told you to calm down and just be patient. I told you that. Stop.
All right, Sam with the Sam Sentinel. What do we got?
Well, I'm going to a 2024 member of the Big Ten with the Sam Sentinel. I saw an article, and I cannot remember. Let me see if I can find it while I'm talking about it. But quarterback of the USC Trojans, Caleb Williams, correct?
Yep, you got it.
And I didn't save the graphics. Great. Caleb Williams got a big NIL deal to come to when he transferred to USC from Oklahoma.
That's right.
And, people are like, of course, it's a obvious move to USC because you're going to get so much more NIL money, and it's just a money grab or whatever. I don't necessarily agree with all the parameters of NIL, but I love to highlight when good things happen with it. So Caleb Williams was seen handing money, Beats headphones to the custodians, to the lower end coaches that maybe don't get that recognition from his NIL money. So he's giving just kind of bigger tips to these people, because he knows that it takes the entire staff to make sure that their team has everything set the way they need it. And he is using that money that he's getting for his name, image, and likeness to share the wealth with those people that don't normally get recognized. And there were players saying, yeah, we really honestly, we witnessed him walking up to people that were workers there and just handing them some Beats headphones and saying, thank you for what you do. You don't go unnoticed. And that is an amazing thing to do in this day and age of a lot of players think that they're entitled. and I work hard for this money. It's my money, which that's their prerogative. But that is the stuff that gets thrown out there as this is NIL. But the stuff of Caleb Williams putting, some of that NIL money back into the program at the lower range and giving gifts to those people that make his life easier. Amazing job. I'm going to eat a little bit more root for Caleb Williams just because USC, take him or leave him or whatever. But he gets a little bit higher boost in my book because wow, what a great move. What a grateful move. So that's the Sam Sentinel.
I like that. I like that a lot. And kind of roping it back to the Big Ten, you saw that with CJ Stroud recently, where he bought his team suits and kind of dressed the entire team. I mean, a little bit different, but it's really cool to see some of these star quarterbacks doing some cool things. So it's a
they
great
recognize that while they're making the money and making the names, they're still there have to be people there helping them get there. So it's nice to see that they're rewarding those people, helping them get to that. I mean, because if CJ Stroud isn't the quarterback of Ohio State and doing so well, he doesn't get that NIL money. And so those people helping him get to that, he recognizes that, and good on him too.
Tony, do you want to jump on that?
I would say, and it just kind of helps reaffirm that, football is a team sport. These guys are talented and they have to work, but, you can be the best quarterback out there, but if you don't have anybody to throw to, you're not going to be good. Same with wide receivers, and I know we keep bringing it back to Iowa. The only person that's really carrying the Iowa team right now is the punter. Like, his back hurts from having to carry Iowa currently. But, Charlie Jones, if he stays on Iowa, Charlie Jones doesn't have nearly the season that he's having like he is with Purdue right now. And that's because of the fact that
he might have an entire
team.
season. He might have an entire season that's like what he's had right now.
Yeah. But again, that just kind of reaffirms that, this is a team thing. You have to have other people to help you succeed.
And I just think it's great that these guys are sharing their success with those that are getting them that. So
it's a good feel good. And it's one of those things that kind of reminds you it's bigger than just a game. And you kind of wish some of those values and principles would spread beyond the lines and into society, where more and more people kind of led by example, the way Caleb Williams has.
And here's the thing. The nice thing is that those rules are in place to allow that. Because now those kids aren't getting in trouble because, this player took money under the table and had cash and he gave other players. You all of a sudden just infected the entire team. Whereas now at least it's available and these guys can give a couple $100, $1,000, even if they chose that much to give to these people as a thank you. I mean, at least you have that.
Yeah.
Silver lining, find it.
Love it. All right. With the Dalton Daily, mine's going to be real quick here, guys, because it's a pretty obvious, or not obvious, but it's a pretty short and sweet note. But I'm not sure that a ton of people are aware of it. At Rutgers this weekend, the Scarlet Knights are on the road to take on Temple. The Scarlet Knights are 17.5-point favorites, so Vegas says Rutgers will march out of there with a win. With that win, Greg Schiano will become the winningest coach in Rutgers football history, passing Frank Burns, who's currently there. With the win over Wagner this past weekend, Greg Schiano was able to tie Frank Burns. But a win this weekend against Temple would make Greg Schiano the winningest coach in Rutgers football history. And I thought that was an extremely fitting milestone and accomplishment for Greg Schiano. When I think Rutgers football, I think Greg Schiano.
Yeah.
First tenure, second tenure, he's been able to take this program and do some amazing things. And again, we're talking about in the first tenure when he wasn't in the Big Ten and had a little bit of a better path to be able to build that program. He came in and the program was rough. And he's been able to build it back up into a respectable program in the Big Ten. No longer do you look at it and say, hey, there's a 50-some point win, like was the case years ago. So I feel like this is an appropriate way to kind of salute Greg Schiano for his incredible efforts to make Rutgers what Rutgers is. He'll become the winningest all-time coach with the next victory, and it might just come this Saturday against Temple. So that's the Dalton Daily.
You're absolutely right. When I think when I hear Rutgers, it's automatically I think Greg Schiano. It doesn't matter that he hadn't coached there in a few years. Even after he left, it was like Rutgers. Oh, Greg Schiano's school. Yep. Excuse me. And so, it's not an easy win now anymore. Now, granted, you're probably gonna go win. I mean, not probably, but the good teams are probably gonna win. But it's not as an easy win as they expected. So I agree that's I like
Rutgers made a bowl last year. I mean, that's
backdoored into it.
But still, Rutgers of the past used to be 1-11. Like that's...
right, they wouldn't have been considered in past years prior. So they
a win is a win, sir.
Yeah, even though it's a moral victory, right?
That's right.
Because they did go get thumped in that bowl, didn't they?
They did. But in self-defense,
they had to pull everybody back after sending them home, though.
I was going to say their Australian punter was already back home in Australia, and they had to call him from the airport and say, "Hey, do you want to fly back?" And he's like, "Okay," and flew right back over.
I guess I'll come punt another week, sure.
But nonetheless, so that's the Dalton Daily, and that does it for another edition of Big Ten Plus 4 on the way out. Sam, why don't you hit us with where everybody can find us?
Well, I've got this here, and then Tony has a couple other ones. Big Ten at Big Ten Plus 4. I believe that is also our new Instagram as well. Correct, Tony?
Yes, it is. And TikTok as well.
And TikTok.
And
so
TikTok.
You spell out the plus, though, Dalton. You don't put the little plus sign. It's spell out the plus. So at Big Ten Plus 4 for Twitter, for TikTok, and for Instagram. Then Big Ten Plus 4, just type it in Facebook and you'll find it, or you can go to oddpodsmedia.com along with all the other people, family of Odd Pods Media shows. And we're on ASAP every Friday morning, 8:45 a.m. You can find the audio podcast later on Friday. There we go.
Perfect.
Done.
Tony, is that all we need to know about the new TikTok and Instagram? Is there anything you want to add in before we're out?
don't do the TikToks, so
yeah, no, that's pretty much it. I mean, Sam pretty much nailed everything.
All right, then we're good to go. Thank you all for tuning in and joining us this week for another episode of Big Ten Plus 4. Looking forward to next week where we dissect maybe another chaotic college football Saturday. We'll see what the weekend has for us. But in the meantime, I'm Dalton Shetler. That's Sam Sprunger, Tony Hollinsworth. Again, thank you all, and we'll talk to you next week.
See you later.